Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for More Survivalists. In this video, I'm going to be going through what it means to have quality of life. Right, this is an important topic that I covered in my recently published book, Out And Relocating. I went through to a good extent, and I did so because it's not only important for when choosing a place to relocate to, it's also important for assessing your current location, where you are right now, and where it stands in all these categories. In general, you will find that when it comes to relocating within the survival and preparedness type of genre, you find that usually authors are going to be looking for avoiding natural man-made disasters, avoiding large population centers, potential military targets in case of war. You don't want to be getting hit by earthquakes, tsunamis. You're looking at having a land for growing food and such. Now, all those are good, but I at least don't think that's more important than the quality of life that you have as of right now. That's going to be affecting you all day long, 24/7, every single day of the year. And it's not a matter of probability of something happening. It is happening every single day, every single minute, and it directly affects the quality of life, of course, that you have. So what is it that you should be looking for in terms of quality of life? What's important regarding that? One of the most common indicators of quality of life, at least one of the key things people look for, is employment and poverty. If you're looking at a place that has high unemployment rates and high levels of poverty, in general, you will find that those places usually don't have that much of a good quality of life. Right? It's not always the case. Sometimes you have places that have a lower income. Without being extremely poor, the income level is not that good, but they still have quite nice quality of life. But the amount of jobs available that you have and the level of poverty is going to be an important factor to keep in mind. Of course, if you don't have a job, if you're dealing with high rates of unemployment, then things are going to be looking tough for you, no doubt. Poverty, again, it's not only just about the amount of crime. Usually you will find that when there's a lot of poverty, there is usually more problems with crime. It's not always the case, but sometimes it is. Sometimes in the country you find smaller towns and communities that have a lower income, and they still have great numbers in terms of crime. They're very, very safe in spite of being a little bit more poor, but because of the social context that you're dealing with and the kind of lifestyle that people have, it doesn't impact the society in the same way as it would in some of the larger communities. This brings us quickly to crime and corruption. At least for me, crime would be a key category to keep in mind. Crime is essential to the quality of life that you will have. Maybe that's because I've lived with high crime so much, most of my life dealing with that. It basically ruins anything else good that a place has. No matter how great everything else is, if you cannot live safe wherever it is that you are, if crime contaminates and influences everything else in your life, there's no point to it. High crime is definitely one of the things that I would be looking for, and I would avoid at all costs. Nothing else is worth it if you have to deal with high levels of crime. Corruption is again linked strongly to crime, and you have generally this this triangle of poverty, crime, and corruption. In general, you'll find that they're linked. If you have high levels of crime, there's a good chance that there's going to be lots of corruption in that place as well. Of course, high corruption in a political and police level is, understandably so, a good environment for more crime. So also crime, and this I explain in my book regarding how corruption affects all the other categories. because if you have high levels of corruption, if you don't have a good transparency, and there's a Transparency International charts, so as to take a look at there, which I did include in my book, because it's very important. If you have high levels of corruption, then there's a good chance that the numbers of crime are a lie, that the poverty, inflation, health, mortality rate, all those, there's a good chance that those are cooked or altered or not truthful because of the corruption. Because of the corruption levels, those numbers may not reflect reality as nearly as well as they should. Health is another key aspect. If you don't have health, you're going to be feeling it eventually, because we all sooner or later need a little bit of help regarding that, especially as we grow older. Health, it's not only regarding health quality, but also the cost of health, how expensive it is. Doesn't matter if you have a good health care available if you cannot afford it. And that's another way to look at it. Don't just look at what kind of hospitals I have within my reach, what kind of healthcare institutions I have, how much does it cost to actually get treatment there, and what can I expect within my budget. All right, one of the main problems in the United States is the cost of healthcare. It's the most expensive healthcare in the planet. You know, you have better or worse health insurance schemes and such, but it's going to be having quite a bit of an impact, especially if you're not on a very high income level and you are working on a tighter budget. Cost of healthcare will be an issue as well. But definitely look at what's available to you, especially in terms of emergency medical care. You just don't want to be that far from emergency medical care, because sooner or later you're going to be needing it. I was talking with a good friend the other day, and he was telling me that, well, how in some places people are more used to coping. You know, in the country, he was telling me, I'm a country boy. In the country, we cope with things differently. Yeah, sure, you cope with things differently, but if you have a seizure, if you have a heart attack, or if you have a stroke, you're not going to be coping with anything. You need fast, immediate medical care. And it's also true regarding accidents, you know, in terms of especially in the country, in farms and such, the possibility of accidents, of farm accidents, is quite high. So that's a key aspect to look at, how far you are from, at the very least, a good medical emergency medical care in case you need it all of a sudden. Education, especially for those of us that have kids, education is pretty important, because it's going to be determining the kind of tools that children will have available to them in the future. Not only for kids, but also for adults, in terms of gaining additional tools for better employment possibilities. Education may do that for you. You may get a training for getting a better job, or for advancing in your line of work that you are in already. If you can take additional classes, include more skills, that gives you a better perspective in the future. So education would also be important as well. Recreation, leisure, green areas, those things, you know, this will depend a little bit more. This would be linked also with the cultural level of an area. What you can do in terms of leisure and recreation, the cultural offerings in wherever it is that you are, those will have an impact in quality of life as well. Now, this is a little bit more of a personal perspective thing, because leisure means different things for different people. For some people, leisure means going to the opera or going to very fine restaurants. For other people, leisure means going camping and having a good time in the outdoors. So this would be one of those things that will depend on each individual case. But I think we can all agree on green areas, parks, national parks, or even green areas within urban settings, increasing the quality of life that you have. And also look at pollution. Pollution is sometimes overlooked, and this is a little bit of a tricky thing. Pollution is not always linked to high urban areas. Sometimes because of industrial or natural occurrences, in some places you have larger amounts of pollution than in some other areas. Many times the use of pesticides, maybe Latin America would be a great example of that. Some of the most polluted places in Latin America, in South America, are the ones where you have large extensions of agricultural land. Because of the type of pesticides used, they contaminate the water, and people end up having all sorts of medical and health complications because of the pesticides and because of the industrial developments in these locations. And maybe when you drive around them, you just see wide open green spaces and you think, okay, this is fantastic quality of life. But behind that, the truth is that it's very much polluted. Social belonging and immigration. How accepted are you in this place that you're looking at? One of the things I read lots of people mentioning when relocating within the United States is how tough it is to become integrated to the smaller communities. It takes even decades in some cases to be accepted. The level of acceptance that you will have within a community will also impact the quality of life that you have. A little bit of a personal perspective here would be how much you actually care about being integrated in a community, but it's still important. You definitely don't want to be in a place, in a community that, because of whatever reason, may that be ethnic, your skin color, your religion, whatever that is, and people not being accepting of you. That's it is a disadvantage by all means. This would be a thing in where larger population centers will usually be a little bit more open-minded regarding people coming from other places, other states, other countries entirely, more accepting of immigrants in general. Usually the smaller the community, the harder it may be to become integrated. Now there are of course differences. Some small communities are very much open-minded, but you have to pay special attention to that and realize how important it is to you and what you're looking at when you get there. Cost of living. This would be one of the key aspects as well, maybe one of the most important ones. If you cannot actually afford to live there, then there's no use. Cost of living will dictate how far your money goes as well. It's not just about actually being able to live there, but what you're able to do with the amount of income that you have. In general, you will find that the higher cost the lower the cost of living, in general, you'll find that there's a more wealth. There's less wealth. With less wealth, with more poverty, the cheaper the cost of living. Now, the trick for me, at least, is finding that, maybe like everything else in life, it's like finding that balance where cost of living is low enough, where poverty is not as bad, and in spite of all that, you have very, very low crime rates and good quality of life because it scores well in all these other categories that we're mentioning. That key balance that we're looking at, that makes for a great place to relocate to and to live in. If wherever it is that you are scores well in all these things, then that's fantastic. Infrastructure as well. In terms of infrastructure, we're looking at the different qualities that we have in terms of roads, of public transportation, of public buildings, and the construction in general. You want at least you want at least an acceptable level of infrastructure, ease of getting there, how well bridges, roads are being taken care of. That's going to be affecting as well your quality of life. At least a minimum level of quality in terms of infrastructure, especially when it comes to education and healthcare. It just makes for better quality of life in general. Freedom. One of those topics that I did include in my book, several charts of freedom, and not always mention how important it is. Sometimes, especially when you're looking at different countries, you have some countries that score very well but have very, very little freedom, and that really sucks. Singapore would be a good example of that. Singapore scores pretty well in some of these important categories, but in freedom it completely sucks. You have very, very little freedom there, and you know, living in a golden cage, at least to me, is not an option. Finally, resilience to disasters, the availability of water and natural resources such as having green areas nearby, but also the availability of food in the area, how much food is being produced, but mostly the availability of water. If a disaster strikes in an area, one of the key points is water. It's always been that way. Water means life, and that never will change. The likeliness of natural disasters, and here we go back to that survival preparedness way of looking at things, you know, and strictly deciding on where to live based on this final point that I'm mentioning here, which is actual disasters and the possibility of these taking place. It has to be taken into account as well, but at least to me, it's not the main reason that I'm looking at when relocating. I don't want to be living close to a military base. I don't want to be living in a place where there's good chance of earthquakes, tsunamis, or other natural disasters taking place, or man-made ones. But it's not the only thing that you should be looking at. Definitely not the only thing that I look at, but I do also take it into account. Folks, just a few more things of what to look at when evaluating where you live or where you maybe want to be living in the future. All things that I have covered in my book, Bugging Out and Relocating, the link which is there below. Folks, have a great weekend. Take care. See you on our next video. Have a great day.